What went wrong with the Los Angeles Clippers? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoy this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. After the 2019 NBA season, during that offseason, the Los Angeles Clippers really shocked the NBA world. They were able to build an absolute powerhouse by not only bringing in Kawhi Leonard, but also bringing in Paul George and creating a real super team in Los Angeles. But probably the most exciting part of this Clippers roster wasn't only that they just brought in both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who were obviously both complete superstars at the time and still currently are, but when you looked at the actual roster the Clippers had besides those guys, they had a pretty good and pretty deep roster specifically, which was obviously very exciting going forward. They had guys like Patrick Beverley, who's a great defender and a pretty good point guard. They had Montrezl Harrell, who was very, very exciting going forward. He was obviously a very good player on the offensive side of the ball. He can get rebounds. He was a breakout player the year before. They had Lou Williams. Obviously, we all know Lou Williams. He's an amazing player off the bench. They had Landry Shamet, a really good three-point shooter and good defender. They just had a very good roster overall besides Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and people were very excited to see what they can actually do all together. But of course, when you bring in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George during the offseason and add that to an otherwise very deep and very talented roster, the expectations are going to be very high. And it seemed like this Clippers team was just basically good on every side of the ball. When you actually look at the defensive side, they were also very talented as well. You talk about having Kawhi Leonard, who's probably the best defender in the NBA, if not one of the best defenders in the NBA. Paul George is obviously known for his defensive ability. You have Patrick Beverley, who's also known for his defensive ability. You have a guy like Landry Shamet, that's a great defender as well. You just have so many different guys that are so talented on the defensive side of the ball. Now, just for an example, say for example you're in the playoffs and you're playing a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, and obviously you're playing LeBron James. Of course, LeBron James is one of the best players in the NBA at this point, and he's very difficult to defend. But as the Clippers, when you can throw Kawhi Leonard at LeBron James, who's been known to actually do a great job, or as good of a job as you could possibly do on a guy like LeBron James, and you try to slow him down, but also if Kawhi Leonard gets tired, now you can throw a guy like Paul George at Kawhi Leonard as well, and you have another player you can throw at him after that. You just have so many great different defensive players you can throw at a guy like LeBron James. It just makes it so difficult for LeBron, and it's obviously a huge benefit for this Clippers team. It's not only they have one great defensive player, they have multiple great defensive players. So now they don't really have to tire out their best defensive player. They can throw out multiple great defensive players at the opposing team's best player each and every night. But to really show how talented and how great this Clippers team was on paper, let's quickly look at the best players the Clippers do have on the roster and see what they could actually do. So of course, starting with Kawhi Leonard, I think we all know what Kawhi can do. He's obviously a great three-point shooter at this point in his career. That's something he's really been working on each and every season ever since he's gotten into the NBA and really perfected his three-point shot. His mid-range area is something that he's always been able to do throughout his entire career, and that's definitely his bread and butter with that post turnaround fadeaway, that pull-up mid-range shot, that catch-and-shoot mid-range shot. He's just complete money from that area. And getting all the way to the basket, Kawhi is also very effective. He's obviously very athletic and he can posterize you, but that's not his main bread and butter. Typically what he does when he gets to the basket is usually muscles you out of the way or finishes around you with pretty crafty layups around the basket. So overall, Kawhi is just an amazing offensive player, and on the defensive side of the ball, we all know Kawhi is otherworldly. He's an amazing defender, and in my opinion, probably the best defender we do have in the NBA. But now talking about a guy like Paul George, obviously Paul George is amazing on the offensive side of the ball as well. He's a great three-point shooter, he's a good mid-range shooter, and he's also very good getting to the basket. And on the defensive side of the ball, obviously Paul George is very elite as well. He's one of the best defenders we do have in the NBA. Obviously not as good as a guy like Kawhi Leonard and not in that status, a tier below that, but either way, Paul George is still a very, very good defender in this league. Talking about a guy like Lou Will, I think we all know what Lou Will can do as well. He's a great three-point shooter, he's an amazing mid-range shooter, he's great at drawing those fouls, getting to the line. He's just a great overall scorer and can do it in so many different ways. But now talking about a guy like Montrezl Harrell, obviously he's a guy who recently broke out at that time, and he's obviously a guy who can hit that mid-range shot. He doesn't necessarily have that three-point shot in his arsenal, but maybe he could get to that in the future. But where Montrezl Harrell really does a lot of his work is in the paint. He's a great scorer in the paint. He gets those offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds, some putbacks on the offensive side of the ball. Overall, Montrezl Harrell at that time was just a guy that you would like to have on your roster. And overall, out of all those players that I mentioned were the main players, but they also had some other players on the roster that were very, very helpful to them overall, making this Clippers team such a great team. Not only at the top, they were obviously very talented at the top, but obviously overall as a team as well. But now getting into the question of the video and the reason why you guys clicked on the video, after listing out how good this Clippers team is on paper, of course with the stars they have at top in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and how great they are on the defensive side of the ball with all the amazing defenders they have on the team, how deep they were coming off the bench as well with great scorers like Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell, how is this Clippers team actually not able to win an NBA championship the past 2 seasons? Now I know basically this Clippers team is the same it was 2 seasons ago. They made a few changes, but basically it's the same, and they still could win an NBA championship. But I really feel in that 2020 NBA season, the bubble, I think that was the best chance this Clippers team really had to win an NBA championship. And if they weren't able to win it then, I don't know if they're ever going to be able to win an NBA championship. But I really do think it comes down to a few different reasons why the Clippers weren't able to win a championship when they obviously probably should have on paper. The first reason I think obviously this is the biggest thing is really chemistry. I don't know if this Clippers team ever really had great chemistry going. During the regular season, I think they played very well just due to the amount of talent they had on the offensive side of the ball and defensive side of the ball. But when it came down to the playoffs, and chemistry mattered a lot more than it did during the regular season, and you couldn't just win based off pure talent, I think that's where they really struggled. Especially when you look at the NBA bubble, they struggled to a team in Dallas when a lot of people thought the Clippers should have beat the Dallas Mavericks very, very easily. Now, obviously that Mavericks team played very well. Luka Doncic was absolutely fantastic, and he willed the Dallas Mavericks into that series and back into that series. But either way, I think the Clippers probably should have won that series a little bit earlier. So that was definitely the first warning sign. And then obviously when they went to the Denver Nuggets, they were up 3-1 and then completely blew apart and completely lost a 3-1 lead, and that was terrible. But I think that's more so due to chemistry and the lack of chemistry the Clippers had on their actual roster. Now, in my opinion, I think chemistry was the biggest reason this Clippers team didn't do more and didn't actually win an NBA championship over the past 2 seasons. But another reason is obviously due to the play of Paul George. We all knew in that playoff series in the NBA bubble, Paul George completely collapsed and was not the same player whatsoever. Not only was Paul George just not playing well in general, he was actually hurting his team pretty significantly and how badly he was on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, Paul George completely lost his confidence. He couldn't hit a wide open 3. He couldn't do anything on the offensive side of the ball, but he was still taking shots at the same time, so he's really just hurting his team more so than anything else. And obviously when the second best player in your team is doing that poorly for you, it's going to be very difficult to win a playoff series in general, and that's a big reason why I think they blew that 3-1 lead and lost to the Denver Nuggets. And obviously in this previous season in the playoffs, Kawhi Leonard tore his ACL, so that was obviously a humongous part in why they actually weren't able to win. But of course the issue is the time that Kawhi Leonard actually gets hurt and tears his ACL, Paul George is finally playing well in the playoffs. If Paul George just played well, or as well as he has been in this year's playoffs as he did in the NBA bubble 2 seasons ago in that year's playoffs, then I think the Los Angeles Clippers would have won an NBA championship that season. So they really kind of squandered their opportunity. And due to that, I don't know personally if the Clippers are going to be able to win an NBA championship with this core ever going again. I don't know. I think their championship window kind of passed, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens going forward. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe the Los Angeles Clippers win an NBA championship within the next 2 seasons. Who knows? But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think the Los Angeles Clippers championship window has passed, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.